I never expected that Tuesday afternoon would become the day everything changed. Not just for my son Tommy, but for me, for his school, and for everyone who witnessed what happened on that playground. As I sit here now, months later, I can still feel the weight of that moment pressing against my chest, the way my heart seemed to stop when I first heard those cruel words echoing in my mind. Tommy has Down syndrome. He's 12 years old, with the most infectious smile you've ever seen, and a heart so pure it sometimes makes me wonder if I'm the one who needs protecting, not him. He's been attending Lincoln Elementary for 3 years now, and while we've had our challenges, I thought we'd found our rhythm. I thought we'd found our place in this community. I was wrong. The call came at 2:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was staring at my watch, willing the minutes to pass so I could pick Tommy up from school. Mrs. Henderson, the school secretary, had that careful tone in her voice that every parent of a special needs child learns to recognize. It's the tone that says something happened, but we're not sure how to tell you. Mrs. Patterson, could you come in a bit early today? There was an incident during recess and Tommy is asking for you. Ah. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my keys. The drive to school felt like it took forever, every red light stretching into eternity. I kept thinking about Tommy's morning ritual, how he'd stood in front of the mirror practicing his pronunciation of beautiful, because he'd heard it on a song and wanted to use it to describe the autumn leaves. That's who my son is. He finds beauty in everything, even when the world doesn't always find beauty in him. When I arrived at Lincoln Elementary, the afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the playground. I could see clusters of children playing, their laughter carrying on the crisp October air. But there was something different about the atmosphere, something subdued. Even the teachers seemed to be moving with more purpose, their eyes scanning the playground with heightened awareness. I found Tommy in the principal's office, sitting in the chair that had become too familiar over the years. Not because he was a troublemaker, but because sometimes the world needed help understanding him, and sometimes he needed help understanding the world. Principal Martinez was there, along with Mrs. Chen, Tommy's teacher, and a woman I didn't recognize who introduced herself as the school counselor. Tommy looked up when I walked in, and I saw it immediately. That look in his eyes that every parent dreads. Not physical pain, but something deeper, more confusing. The look of a child trying to process cruelty for the first time. "Mom," he said, and his voice was smaller than usual. Something happened today. I knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in mine. They were warm and slightly sticky from the apple juice he'd had at lunch. Such normal 12-year-old hands. "Tell me what happened, sweetheart." Principal Martinez cleared her throat. "Mrs. Patterson, there was an incident during recess. A group of older students, 8th graders, surrounded Tommy near the monkey bars. They were..." She paused, searching for words. "They were making comments about his appearance. Laughing at him." My chest tightened. I'd prepared for this day, known it would come eventually. But knowing something is coming doesn't make it hurt any less when it arrives. "What kind of comments?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Tommy looked at me with those eyes that always seemed to hold more wisdom than his years should allow. "They said I looked weird, Mom. They asked why I smile like that. They were pointing at me and whispering, but they whispered loud so everyone could hear." The counselor leaned forward. "There were approximately 6 students involved, ranging from 7th to 8th grade. The behavior was completely inappropriate, and we're addressing it with each of them individually. But Mrs. Patterson, there's something else you need to know." I felt my stomach drop. "What else?" Tommy's face suddenly brightened, and for a moment I thought I was seeing things. How could he look happy while telling me about being bullied? "I told them something, Mom. I told them why I'm happy." "What did you tell them, honey?" I said, It's okay. I'm happy because I know how to love people who are different." The room went quiet. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the distant sound of children playing outside. But everyone in that office had gone completely still. Mrs. Chen spoke first. "Tommy, can you tell your mom what happened after you said that?" Tommy nodded eagerly. "One of the boys started crying. I think his name is Marcus. He's in 8th grade and he's really tall. He just started crying and then everyone got quiet. Really quiet. Mrs. Johnson was watching from the swing set, and she said the whole playground went quiet. I looked at the adults in the room, trying to understand what I was hearing. He started crying." Principal Martinez nodded. According to Mrs. Johnson, who witnessed the entire incident, Tommy's response had an immediate impact, not just on the boy who began crying, but on the entire group. The dynamic shifted completely. "What do you mean, shifted?" Tommy answered before anyone else could. "Some of the kids came to hug me later, and Marcus asked if he could sit with me at lunch tomorrow. He said he was sorry for being mean, and that he didn't know why he did it." I felt my eyes filling with tears, but I wasn't sure if they were tears of sadness or pride or something else entirely. "Tommy, you didn't yell at them? You didn't get angry?" He shook his head. "No, Mom. You told me that when people are mean, sometimes it's because they're scared or sad. I wasn't angry. I just wanted them to know that being different isn't bad." The counselor leaned back in her chair. "Mrs. Patterson, I've been working with children for 15 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this. The way Tommy handled the situation, the response from the other students. It was remarkable. But I wasn't thinking about remarkable. I was thinking about my son, sitting on that playground, surrounded by kids who were mocking him, and instead of lashing out or running away, he chose to respond with love. He chose to educate rather than retaliate. "How did you feel when they were laughing at you?" I asked him. Tommy considered this for a moment. "Sad," he said finally, "but not angry sad. Just sad because they didn't understand. Like when people don't understand that the dog at the park is friendly, so they walk away fast. The dog isn't bad. They just don't know. That's when I lost it. Right there in the principal's office, surrounded by educators and counselors, I started crying. Not the quiet, dignified tears of a concerned parent, but the ugly, body-shaking sobs of a mother who realizes her child is wiser and stronger than she ever imagined. The drive home was quiet. Tommy sat in the back seat, humming a song I didn't recognize. Every few minutes he'd point out something interesting. "Look, Mom, that dog is wearing a sweater. Mom, that tree is more orange than yesterday. Mom, do you think clouds get tired of moving?" Normal 12-year-old observations. Normal Tommy observations. As if the most profound moment of his young life had been just another Tuesday afternoon. When we got home, I made his favorite snack, peanut butter on celery sticks, and we sat at the kitchen table. The late afternoon light was streaming through the window, illuminating the artwork he'd created over the years that covered our refrigerator. Drawings of our family, of his dog Max, of rainbows and flowers and all the things that made him happy. "Tommy," I said, watching him carefully arrange the peanut butter on each celery stick. "Do you want to talk more about what happened today?" He looked up at me, peanut butter on his chin. "Can I ask you something, Mom?" "Of course. Why do some people think being different is bad?" I set down my coffee mug, trying to find the right words. I think sometimes people are afraid of things they don't understand. And when people are afraid, they sometimes say or do things that aren't kind. "But being different makes the world more interesting," Tommy said. "Like how some flowers are red and some are yellow and some are purple. If they were all the same color, it would be boring." "That's exactly right, sweetheart. So maybe those kids just forgot that being different is good." "Maybe they did," Tommy nodded sagely. Then I'm glad I reminded them. That evening, my phone started ringing. First, it was Sarah Martinez, whose daughter Emma was in Tommy's class. Then it was David Chen, Mrs. Chen's husband. Then it was parents I'd never spoken to before, all calling to tell me about what their children had witnessed on the playground. Emma came home today and told me the most incredible story, Sarah said. She said Tommy taught everyone a lesson about kindness, without even trying. My son Jake was one of the kids who hugged Tommy afterward. Another parent told me. He said he'd never seen anyone be so brave. By the time I went to bed that night, I'd received 12 phone calls, 17 text messages, and 3 emails from parents whose children had either witnessed or heard about Tommy's response to the bullying. But it wasn't just the quantity of the responses that surprised me. It was the quality, the depth of thought and emotion in what people were sharing. One mother wrote, "My daughter said she learned more about kindness in those 5 minutes on the playground than she had in all her years of school. She asked me if we could invite Tommy over for a play date." Another parent called to say, "My son was one of the kids who was laughing at Tommy. He came home in tears, saying he felt terrible and wanted to apologize. He's been asking me all evening why he thought it was funny in the first place." But the call that affected me most came from a mother I'd never met before. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, "my daughter wasn't even involved in the incident, but she overheard what Tommy said. She has autism, and she's been struggling with feeling different at school. When she heard Tommy's words, she said it made her proud to be different. She asked me to tell you that Tommy is her hero. I stayed up late that night, long after Tommy had gone to sleep, thinking about the day's events. I thought about all the times I'd worried about sending him to school, all the conversations I'd had with teachers and administrators about creating a safe environment for him. I'd spent so much time preparing him for a world that might not understand him, but I'd never considered that he might be the one to help the world understand itself." The next morning, Tommy woke up excited about school. "Mom, Marcus is going to sit with me at lunch today, and Emma said she wants to learn how to play the games I like." "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. I think today is going to be a good day." He was right. When I picked him up that afternoon, Tommy was practically bouncing with excitement. "Mom, you won't believe what happened. Tell me everything." "Well, Marcus sat with me at lunch just like he promised. And then Emma came over, and then Jake, and then Sarah, and then more kids. Mrs. Chen said it was the biggest lunch table she'd ever seen." "That's amazing, Tommy. What did you all talk about?" "Everything. Marcus told me about his little sister, who has trouble reading, and I told him about how I have trouble with math sometimes. And Emma showed me her drawings, and I showed her my rock collection, and Jake asked me to teach him how to make the paper airplanes I like." That afternoon, I got a call from Principal Martinez. "Mrs. Patterson, I wanted to update you on the situation with the students who were involved in yesterday's incident. Of course, we've spoken with each of them individually, and I have to tell you, the level of reflection and remorse has been remarkable. Several of them have asked if they can write apology letters to Tommy. One of them, Marcus, asked if he could do a presentation to his class about kindness and acceptance. Really? And that's not all. Mrs. Johnson, the teacher who witnessed the incident, has asked if she can use what happened as the basis for a school-wide discussion about inclusion and empathy. She believes Tommy's response could be a teaching moment for our entire community. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, but this time it was different. This time it was pride mixed with something else, something that felt like hope. What does that mean, exactly? We'd like to organize a school assembly where students can share their thoughts about kindness, acceptance, and celebrating differences. We were hoping Tommy might be willing to participate, to share his perspective. I thought about Tommy's morning ritual, how he practiced new words in the mirror, how he found beauty in everything around him, how he chose love over anger when faced with cruelty. "I'll ask him," I said, "but I think I know what his answer will be." That evening, I explained Principal Martinez's request to Tommy. He listened carefully, his head tilted to one side the way it always was when he was thinking hard about something. "So they want me to talk to the whole school?" he asked. "They want you to share your thoughts about kindness and being different, but only if you want to." Tommy was quiet for a moment. "Will there be a microphone?" "Probably." "And will Marcus be there?" "I think so." "And all the other kids?" "Yes." Tommy smiled. "Then yes, I want to do it. I want to tell everyone that being different is good." The assembly was scheduled for the following Friday. In the days leading up to it, I watched Tommy prepare with the same care he put into everything else. He practiced his speech in front of the mirror, just like he practiced his pronunciation. He asked me to help him write down his thoughts, so he wouldn't forget anything important. "I want to tell them about the flowers," he said, "and about how Max is different from other dogs, because he only has 3 legs. But that makes him special. Not bad." The morning of the assembly, I was more nervous than Tommy was. I'd attended plenty of school events over the years, but this felt different. This felt like something that could change everything, for better or worse. The auditorium was packed, not just with students, but with parents, teachers, and community members who had heard about Tommy's story. I sat in the front row, my hands folded in my lap, watching my son stand at the podium with a confidence I'd never seen in him before. "Hi, everyone," he began, his voice clear and strong through the microphone. "My name is Tommy, and I have Down syndrome." The auditorium was completely silent. Not the restless silence of a group of children being forced to sit still, but the attentive silence of people who genuinely wanted to listen. Some kids at school laughed at me because I look different. They said I smile weird and that I look weird. It made me sad, but it didn't make me angry. I could see some of the older students shifting in their seats, and I spotted Marcus sitting in the 3rd row, his attention completely focused on Tommy. I told them that I'm happy because I know how to love people who are different. Because being different isn't bad. It's good. It's like flowers. If all flowers were the same color, gardens would be boring. But when flowers are different colors, gardens are beautiful. Tommy paused, looking out at the audience. "My dog Max only has 3 legs, but he's the best dog ever. He's different, but that makes him special. My mom says I'm different too, but that makes me special." I felt tears starting to fall down my cheeks, but I didn't care. I was watching my son teach an entire auditorium full of people about love and acceptance, and I had never been prouder. "I think everyone is different in some way," Tommy continued. "Some people are tall, some are short. Some people are good at math, some are good at art. Some people have brown hair, some have blonde hair. Some people have Down syndrome. Some people don't. But we're all special because we're all different." He looked directly at Marcus. Marcus said he was sorry for being mean to me. He asked if he could be my friend. I said yes because I like having friends who are different from me. It makes life more interesting. The auditorium was still completely silent, but I could see the impact of Tommy's words on the faces around me. Some children were nodding. Some adults were crying. Some of the older students who had been involved in the original incident were staring at Tommy with expressions of wonder and shame and gratitude all mixed together. "I want everyone to know that it's okay to be different," Tommy said. "And it's okay to be friends with people who are different from you. Different is good. Different is beautiful. Different is special." He paused again, and I could see him thinking. trying to remember if there was anything else he wanted to say. "Oh, and one more thing," he added. "If you see someone being mean to someone else because they're different, you can tell them what I told those kids. You can tell them that different is good, and maybe they'll remember that being different makes the world more beautiful." Tommy smiled his beautiful, infectious smile. "Thank you for listening." The applause started slowly, just a few people clapping. But within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet, applauding not just for Tommy, but for the lesson he'd taught all of us. I watched as Marcus stood up and started clapping harder than anyone else, tears streaming down his face. After the assembly, we were surrounded by people wanting to talk to Tommy, to thank him, to share their own stories. But the conversation that meant the most to me was the one I overheard between Tommy and Marcus. "Tommy," Marcus said, approaching us carefully, "I wanted to say thank you for teaching me about being different and for forgiving me for being mean." Tommy looked at him with genuine curiosity. "Why were you mean to me?" Marcus thought for a moment. "I think I was scared. I didn't understand why you were different. And I thought, maybe if I laughed at you, other kids would think I was cool. But I was wrong. I was really, really wrong." "It's okay," Tommy said. "Sometimes people do things when they're scared. But now you know that different is good, right?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "I know that now. And I want to be your friend, if that's okay." "Of course it's okay," Tommy said. "Want to see my rock collection? That was 6 months ago. Today Tommy's in 7th grade, and Marcus is in 8th. They eat lunch together every day, along with a group of other kids who have become part of what the teachers call Tommy's table. It's not just kids with disabilities. It's kids who are different in all kinds of ways. Kids who are shy, kids who are artistic, kids who are athletic, kids who are academic, kids who are funny, kids who are serious, kids who have learned that different is good. The school has implemented a new program called Different is Beautiful, based on Tommy's assembly speech. It's a peer mentorship program where older students are paired with younger students, not to help them with academics, but to help them understand and celebrate their differences. Marcus has become one of the program's most enthusiastic volunteers. He told me recently that Tommy changed his life. "I used to think I had to be mean to people who were different to fit in," he said. "But Tommy taught me that the people who are different are the ones who make life interesting. They're the ones who have the most to teach us." Tommy's teacher, Mrs. Chen, has told me that his presence in the classroom has changed the entire dynamic. "The other students look out for each other more," she said. "They're more patient with differences, more willing to help each other." Tommy has created a culture of acceptance just by being himself. But perhaps the most profound change has been in me. I spent years worrying about how the world would treat my son, about whether he would be accepted, whether he would be safe, whether he would be happy. I never imagined that he would be the one to change the world around him. I've learned that Tommy's wisdom isn't despite his Down syndrome. It's part of who he is, his ability to see beauty in differences, to respond to cruelty with kindness, to choose love over anger. These aren't compensations for his disability. They're gifts that come from his unique perspective on the world. The other day I was having coffee with another parent from the school, and she said something that stuck with me. "You know, we spend so much time trying to teach our children to be successful, to be competitive, to be winners. But Tommy has taught our kids something more important. He's taught them to be kind." That evening I shared this conversation with Tommy. He listened thoughtfully, then said, "Mom, do you think I'm a good teacher?" "I think you're the best teacher I know," I told him. "Good," he said, "because I like teaching people about being different. It makes me happy." Tommy still practices new words in the mirror every morning. He still finds beauty in autumn leaves and dogs wearing sweaters and clouds that look like animals. He still has the most infectious smile I've ever seen. But now, when he looks in the mirror, I see something different in his eyes. I see the confidence of someone who knows their worth, who understands their purpose, who has learned that being different isn't just okay. It's powerful. Last week I got a call from a mother in the next district over. Her daughter has autism and she'd heard about Tommy's story. She wanted to know if Tommy would be willing to speak at her daughter's school, to share his message about celebrating differences. "Tommy," I said, "there's a little girl who needs to hear what you have to say about being different. Would you like to help her?" Tommy's face lit up. "Can I tell her about the flowers?" "You can tell her whatever you think she needs to hear." "Then yes, I want to help her. I want to tell her that different is beautiful. That's my son. That's Tommy. He's 12 years old. He has Down syndrome. And he's changing the world one heart at a time. Not through grand gestures or dramatic speeches, but through simple truths delivered with love. Through the radical act of choosing kindness over cruelty, understanding over judgment, acceptance over rejection. They laughed at my son because he has Down syndrome. But he didn't laugh back. He didn't yell or fight or run away. He simply told them the truth, that he's happy because he knows how to love people who are different. And in that moment, he changed everything. Sometimes I think about that afternoon on the playground, about the choice Tommy made when faced with cruelty. He could have responded with anger, with hurt, with withdrawal. Instead, he chose to respond with love. He chose to educate rather than retaliate. He chose to see the humanity in the children who were mocking him, and to offer them a chance to see the humanity in him. That choice, that moment of grace under pressure, that decision to choose love over fear. It rippled outward in ways none of us could have imagined. It changed Marcus from a bully into a mentor. It changed a school from a place where differences were mocked to a place where differences are celebrated. It changed a community from one that merely tolerated diversity to one that actively embraces it. But most importantly, it changed me. It changed my understanding of what it means to be different, what it means to be strong, what it means to be wise. I used to think I was the one who had to protect Tommy from the world. Now I understand that Tommy is the one who's been protecting the world from itself, one act of kindness at a time. When people ask me how I raised such a remarkable child, I tell them the truth. I didn't raise him to be remarkable. I raised him to be himself. And being himself, it turns out, is the most remarkable thing of all. Tommy is different. He has Down syndrome. He processes information differently. He communicates differently. He sees the world differently. But those differences aren't deficits to be overcome. They're gifts to be celebrated. They're the source of his wisdom, his kindness, his ability to see beauty where others see only difference. They laughed at my son because he has Down syndrome. But he taught them that laughter born from mockery is hollow, while joy born from acceptance is transformative. He taught them that being different isn't something to hide or be ashamed of, but something to embrace and celebrate. And in the end, he taught us all that the most powerful force in the world isn't strength or intelligence or popularity or conformity. It's love. It's the radical, transformative power of choosing to love people who are different from us. It's the decision to see beauty in diversity, to find strength in vulnerability, to choose kindness over cruelty. My son has Down syndrome. He's different, and he's changing the world. That's not despite his differences. That's because of them. But this story isn't just about Tommy. It's about all of us, the parents, the teachers, the children, the community members who witnessed something extraordinary and chose to let it change us. because that's what real transformation looks like. It's not a single moment of revelation, but a series of small choices to be better, to do better, to see more clearly. In the months that followed that first assembly, I began to understand something I'd never fully grasped before. I'd spent 12 years of Tommy's life preparing him for a world that might not accept him, but I'd never considered that maybe the world needed to be prepared for him. I'd focused so much on helping him fit in that I'd almost missed the profound gift he brought, simply by being exactly who he was. The transformation wasn't just in the other children, though their growth was remarkable to witness. Marcus, who had gone from bully to best friend, started a blog called Different is Beautiful, where he shared stories about the diverse students at Lincoln Elementary. Emma, who had been one of Tommy's first lunch companions, created an art project celebrating the unique qualities of each student in her class. Jake, who had learned to make Tommy's paper airplanes, started a peer tutoring program where students taught each other their special talents. But the transformation I was most surprised by was my own. For 12 years, I had carried the weight of advocacy on my shoulders. I had fought for Tommy's inclusion, argued for his accommodations, explained his needs to teachers and administrators and other parents. I had become so accustomed to being his voice that I hadn't fully realized when he'd found his own. The first time I noticed this shift was during a parent-teacher conference in November. Mrs. Chen was telling me about Tommy's progress in social studies, and I found myself automatically starting to explain his learning differences, to contextualize his achievements within the framework of his disability. But Mrs. Chen stopped me. "Mrs. Patterson," she said gently, "Tommy doesn't need you to explain him anymore. He's explaining himself quite well." She was right. In the month since the playground incident, Tommy had become his own advocate. When he needed help understanding an assignment, he asked for it clearly and specifically. When other students had questions about Down syndrome, he answered them with patience and humor. When he felt overwhelmed or needed a break, he communicated that need without shame or apology. I realized I had been so focused on protecting Tommy from the world's potential rejection that I had almost missed the moment when he stopped needing that protection. Not because the world had become perfectly accepting, but because he had become perfectly confident in his own worth. This shift in Tommy's self-advocacy coincided with another change I hadn't expected. Other parents began seeking me out, not just parents of children with disabilities, but parents whose children were different in other ways. Parents of children who were shy or creative, or struggled academically, or didn't fit into traditional social groups. "How did you teach Tommy to be so confident?" they would ask me. "How did you help him embrace his differences instead of hiding them?" The truth was, I wasn't sure I had taught him that at all. I thought about all the conversations we'd had over the years, all the moments when I'd tried to prepare him for potential rejection or misunderstanding. I realized that somewhere along the way, without my conscious intention, I had communicated something more important than protection. I had communicated acceptance. Not just acceptance of his Down syndrome, but acceptance of him as a whole person, acceptance of his interests, his perspective, his way of moving through the world. I had never asked him to be anything other than exactly who he was, and somehow that had been enough. But as I reflected on this, I also began to recognize the ways I had been limiting myself. For 12 years, I had defined myself primarily as Tommy's mother, as an advocate for people with disabilities, as someone whose life revolved around managing the challenges of raising a child with special needs. These weren't wrong identities, but they were incomplete ones. The confidence I saw growing in Tommy began to inspire a different kind of confidence in me. If he could stand in front of an entire school and speak his truth without apology, maybe I could start speaking mine too. I started small. When other parents asked me about Tommy's confidence, instead of deflecting or minimizing my role, I began sharing what I had learned about the power of unconditional acceptance. When teachers or administrators suggested modifications to Tommy's education that I felt were unnecessary or limiting, I spoke up with the same clarity and conviction that Tommy had shown on the playground. But the biggest change came when I decided to start writing about our experiences. I had always been a private person, reluctant to share our story beyond the necessary advocacy work. But watching Tommy's willingness to be vulnerable in service of education and understanding inspired me to do the same. I started a blog called Different is Beautiful, inspired by Marcus's initiative but focused on the parent perspective. I wrote about the challenges and joys of raising a child with Down syndrome, but also about the broader questions of how we define worth, how we measure success, how we create communities that truly welcome everyone. The response was overwhelming. Parents from around the country reached out to share their own stories, to ask questions, to offer support. Teachers wrote to say that reading about Tommy's perspective had changed how they approached inclusion in their own classrooms. Adults with disabilities shared how Tommy's message had helped them embrace their own differences with pride. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from a teenager with Down syndrome in Oregon. Her name was Sarah, and she was 16 years old. She had read Tommy's story and wanted to share her own. "Tommy is right," she wrote. "Different is beautiful, but sometimes it's hard to remember that when people stare at you or talk to you like you're a little kid. Tommy's story reminds me that I can teach people about Down syndrome just by being myself. I want to be like Tommy when I grow up." When I showed Tommy Sarah's message, he was quiet for a long time. Then he looked at me with that expression I had come to recognize as his thinking face. "Mom," he said, "do you think there are other kids like me who need to hear that different is beautiful?" "I think there are kids everywhere who need to hear that," I told him. "Can we tell them?" That conversation led to what became known as the Different is Beautiful tour. Tommy and I began visiting schools, community centers, and organizations to share his message about celebrating differences. At first, I did most of the talking, with Tommy adding his perspective and answering questions. But gradually, the balance shifted. Tommy became the primary speaker, with me providing context and support. Watching my son address audiences of hundreds of people, seeing the impact of his words on children and adults alike, I began to understand something profound about the nature of influence and leadership. Tommy's power didn't come from his ability to command attention or his skill at public speaking. It came from his authenticity, his willingness to be completely himself in every situation. He didn't try to hide his differences or compensate for them. He didn't attempt to be inspiring or profound. He simply shared his truth with the same matter-of-fact honesty he brought to everything else in his life. And somehow, that honesty was more powerful than any polished presentation could have been. During one of our visits to a middle school in Denver, a 7th grade girl approached Tommy after his presentation. She was small for her age, with thick glasses and a nervous demeanor that suggested she was often the target of bullying. "Tommy," she said quietly, "I'm different too. I'm really good at math, but kids make fun of me because I'm smart. They say I'm weird." Tommy looked at her with genuine interest. "What kind of math are you good at?" "All kinds," she said, warming to the topic. "I love algebra and geometry, and I'm learning calculus on my own." "Wow," Tommy said, and his admiration was completely genuine. "That's amazing. I'm not good at math at all. I bet you could teach me things I don't know." The girl's face lit up. "Really? You don't think it's weird that I like math?" "Are you kidding?" Tommy said. "I think it's awesome. Math is really hard and you're really good at it. That makes you special." I watched this interaction with a mixture of pride and amazement. Here was my son, who struggled with basic arithmetic, celebrating another child's mathematical gifts without a trace of envy or insecurity. He saw her difference not as something that separated her from others, but as something that made her valuable to the community. That evening, the girl's mother called me. "I wanted to thank you," she said through tears. "Emma hasn't stopped talking about Tommy's presentation. She's been hiding her mathematical abilities for months, afraid of being teased. But after talking to Tommy, she said she wants to join the math club. She said Tommy taught her that being different isn't just okay. It's something to be proud of." These interactions became the heart of our presentations. Tommy had a gift for connecting with children who felt different or marginalized, for seeing their unique qualities and reflecting them back as strengths, rather than weaknesses. He didn't offer them advice or try to solve their problems. He simply recognized their worth and celebrated their differences. As our tour expanded, we began to encounter more complex situations. We visited schools where inclusion was still more of a theory than a practice, where children with disabilities were segregated into separate classrooms with minimal interaction with their typical peers. We met families who were struggling with recent diagnoses, who were afraid for their children's futures, who were overwhelmed by the challenges ahead. In these situations, I found myself drawing on reserves of strength and wisdom I didn't know I possessed. The years of advocacy, the challenges we had faced and overcome, the growth I had witnessed in Tommy and in our community, all of it had prepared me for this larger purpose. I began to understand that our story was part of a much bigger narrative about human worth and dignity. Every time Tommy stood up in front of a group of people and declared that different is beautiful, he was challenging fundamental assumptions about what it means to be valuable, what it means to belong, what it means to contribute to society. During a presentation at a high school in Phoenix, a senior named Michael approached us afterward. He was a football player, tall and athletic, exactly the kind of teenager I would have expected to be popular and confident. But his question revealed a different reality. "Tommy," he said, "I have dyslexia. I'm really good at sports, but I struggle with reading and writing. Sometimes I feel stupid, especially when I have to read out loud in class. How do you stay confident when you're different?" Tommy considered this question seriously. "Do you like being good at sports?" he asked. "Yeah, I love it." "And does being good at sports make you feel happy?" "Yes." "Then that's your different thing," Tommy said. "Everyone has different things they're good at. You're good at sports, and that's beautiful. Reading is hard for you, but sports are easy. That makes you special." Michael nodded slowly. "I never thought of it that way. Different doesn't mean worse," Tommy continued. "It just means different, and different is what makes the world interesting." Yeah, after that conversation, Michael's teacher told us that he had volunteered to share his experience with dyslexia during their next class discussion about learning differences. He had also started a peer tutoring program where students who struggled academically could receive help from classmates who struggled in other areas. These were the moments that convinced me we were part of something larger than ourselves. Tommy's simple message about celebrating differences was creating ripple effects we couldn't have imagined. It was changing not just individual attitudes, but institutional approaches to diversity and inclusion. The Lincoln Elementary Different is Beautiful program had become a model for other schools. Educators from across the country came to observe their practices, to learn how they had created such an inclusive environment. But what they found wasn't a complex system of policies and procedures. What they found was a culture that had been transformed by the simple recognition that every person has value, that every difference is a potential strength, that every individual has something unique to contribute. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a researcher from the University of Colorado who came to study the program, put it this way: "What's remarkable about Lincoln Elementary isn't that they've solved the problem of inclusion. It's that they've reframed the entire conversation. Instead of asking how to help different children fit in, they're asking how different children can help everyone understand the beauty of diversity." This reframing had profound implications that extended far beyond the school walls. Parents reported that their children were more accepting of differences in all areas of life. Teachers noted that students were more collaborative, more willing to help each other, more creative in their problem-solving approaches. Community members observed that the families associated with Lincoln Elementary seemed more cohesive, more supportive of one another. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the children themselves understood their own worth. They had learned, through Tommy's example, and through their own experiences, that their differences weren't obstacles to overcome, but gifts to celebrate. They had learned that belonging wasn't about becoming like everyone else, but about being valued for exactly who they were. A year and a half after that first playground incident, I received a letter from Marcus, who was now a freshman in high school. He had been elected to the student council and was working to implement a Different is Beautiful program at his new school. "Dear Mrs. Patterson," he wrote, "I wanted to thank you and Tommy for changing my life. I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true. Before I met Tommy, I thought being cool meant making fun of people who were different. I thought I had to put other people down to feel good about myself. But Tommy taught me that the coolest thing you can do is celebrate what makes people unique. He taught me that being different isn't something to hide or be ashamed of, it's something to be proud of. I'm working to create a program here at Roosevelt High that will teach other students what Tommy taught me. I want every kid to know that different is beautiful." Reading Marcus's letter, I was struck by how far we had all come. The boy who had once surrounded Tommy with cruel laughter had become a leader in promoting acceptance and inclusion. The transformation wasn't just in Marcus, but in all of us who had witnessed Tommy's response to cruelty and chosen to let it change us. Tommy, now 13 and in 8th grade, had grown into his role as an advocate and educator. He spoke with confidence and clarity about his experiences, but he had also developed a deeper understanding of the complexities of difference and belonging. He understood that not everyone would accept his message immediately, that change was often slow and difficult, that setbacks were part of the process. During a recent presentation at a middle school in Atlanta, a 6th grade boy challenged Tommy's message directly. "It's easy for you to say different is beautiful," the boy said. "But what if your difference makes you bad at everything? What if you're just weird and nobody likes you?" The auditorium went quiet. I felt my protective instincts flare, ready to step in and redirect the conversation. But Tommy held up his hand slightly, a gesture that had become his signal that he wanted to handle something himself. "Can I ask you something?" Tommy said to the boy. "What do you like to do? What makes you happy?" The boy was quiet for a moment, then mumbled, "I like to draw, but I'm not good at it. Can you show me something you drew?" The boy hesitated, then pulled out a notebook and showed Tommy a sketch of a dragon. It was actually quite good, with careful attention to detail and shading. "This is amazing," Tommy said, and his admiration was genuine. "I can't draw anything like this. This dragon looks real. You really think it's good?" "I think it's beautiful. And I think you're good at drawing. Maybe you just need practice to get even better." The boy smiled slightly. "Thanks. Different doesn't mean bad." Tommy continued, addressing the whole auditorium now. "Different means unique, and unique is valuable. Everyone has something special about them, even if they don't know what it is yet." After the presentation, the boy approached Tommy with his notebook. "I have more drawings," he said. "Do you want to see them?" Tommy spent 20 minutes looking through the boys' artwork, commenting on each piece with genuine appreciation. By the end of their conversation, the boy was standing taller, speaking more confidently, sharing his plans for an art project he wanted to create. Watching this interaction, I realized that Tommy had developed something beyond just self-confidence. He had developed the ability to see potential in others, to recognize and nurture the unique gifts that every person possesses. He had learned that celebrating differences wasn't just about accepting his own Down syndrome, but about creating space for everyone to be authentically themselves. This realization crystallized for me during a conversation we had on the flight home from Atlanta. Tommy was looking through the boy's notebook, which he had been given as a gift, when he looked up at me with a thoughtful expression. "Mom," he said, "do you think I'm a good teacher?" "I think you're an excellent teacher," I replied. "What makes you ask?" "I was thinking about that boy today. He was sad because he thought he was weird. But he wasn't weird. He was just different. And his different was really beautiful. How did you know how to help him?" Tommy thought for a moment. I remembered how I felt when those kids laughed at me. I felt sad because I thought maybe they were right. Maybe I was weird. But then I remembered that you always told me I was special, and Mrs. Chen told me I was special, and Marcus told me I was special. So I thought maybe that boy needed someone to tell him he was special too. And you were right. Yeah, I think everyone needs someone to tell them they're special, especially when they're different. That conversation marked another turning point in our journey. Tommy had moved beyond simply accepting his own differences to actively helping others embrace theirs. He had become not just an advocate for people with disabilities, but a champion for anyone who felt marginalized or misunderstood. As we continued our presentations across the country, I began to document the stories of the children and families we met. Each story was unique, but they all shared common themes: the struggle to belong, the pain of rejection, the transformative power of acceptance, the joy of being valued for who you are. There was Maria, a 10-year-old girl with autism who had been homeschooled because her parents feared she wouldn't be accepted in a traditional classroom. After hearing Tommy's presentation, she decided she wanted to try public school. Her parents were nervous, but they enrolled her in a school that had implemented a Different is Beautiful program. Maria thrived, finding friends who appreciated her unique perspective and teachers who celebrated her strengths. There was David, a high school senior with cerebral palsy, who had been relegated to the sidelines of school life, overlooked and underestimated by his peers. After Tommy's visit to his school, a group of students invited David to join their study group. They discovered that his analytical mind and attention to detail made him an excellent tutor. David went on to graduate as valedictorian and received a full scholarship to college. There was Ashley, a middle school student who had been bullied for her weight and her love of science fiction. After Tommy's presentation, she started a science fiction club at her school. What began as a small group of like-minded students grew into a thriving community that celebrated creativity and imagination. Ashley discovered that her differences weren't obstacles to friendship, but the foundation for meaningful connections. Each of these stories reinforced the central message of Tommy's advocacy, that differences aren't deficits to be overcome, but gifts to be celebrated. That belonging isn't about conformity, but about being valued for your authentic self. That community isn't about similarity, but about appreciation for diversity. But perhaps the most profound story was one that hit closer to home. It was the story of how Tommy's message had transformed not just the people who heard it, but the person who lived it every day. On a quiet evening in March, exactly 2 years after the playground incident, I found Tommy in his room, working on a project for school. He was creating a poster about careers he might want to pursue as an adult. I was struck by the ambition and optimism of his choices. Teacher, public speaker, advocate, writer. Tommy, I said, do you remember that day on the playground when those kids laughed at you? He looked up from his poster. Yeah, I remember. Do you ever wish you had responded differently? Tommy considered this question seriously. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had gotten angry, or if I had run away. But then I think about Marcus and Emma, and all the kids we've met who needed to hear that different is beautiful. If I had responded differently, maybe they wouldn't have learned that. So you're glad it happened? I'm not glad those kids were mean to me, Tommy said. But I'm glad I got to teach them something important. And I'm glad I got to meet all the other kids who needed to hear it too. You know, Tommy, you've taught me a lot too. What did I teach you? I thought about how to answer this question. How could I explain that he had taught me about the power of authenticity, about the courage required to be vulnerable, about the strength that comes from embracing rather than hiding your differences? You taught me that being different isn't something to be ashamed of, I said finally. You taught me that our differences are what make us valuable. And you taught me that sometimes the best way to respond to cruelty is with kindness. Tommy smiled. You taught me that too, Mom. You taught me that I'm special, just the way I am. As I tucked him into bed that night, I reflected on the journey we had taken together. It had begun with a moment of cruelty on a playground, but it had become something so much larger. It had become a movement of acceptance, a celebration of diversity, a testament to the power of choosing love over fear. Tommy's simple response to bullying had created ripple effects that continued to spread. Schools across the country were implementing Different is Beautiful programs. Families were having conversations about acceptance and inclusion. Children were learning to see differences as strengths rather than weaknesses. But beyond the public impact, there was a personal transformation that was equally profound. Tommy had grown from a boy who was targeted for his differences into a young man who celebrated them. He had learned that his Down syndrome wasn't a limitation to overcome, but a perspective to share. He had discovered that his unique way of seeing the world was exactly what the world needed to see. And I had learned that my role as his mother wasn't to prepare him for a world that might not accept him, but to help him prepare the world to accept everyone. I had learned that advocacy wasn't just about fighting for accommodations and services, but about changing hearts and minds. I had learned that the most powerful tool for creating change wasn't legislation or policy, but the simple act of living authentically and encouraging others to do the same. As I write this, Tommy is now 14 years old. He's in high school, where he continues to be a leader in promoting acceptance and inclusion. He's still friends with Marcus, who is now a senior and has been accepted to college with plans to study special education. He's still part of the lunch table that has become a model for inclusive community building. But most importantly, he's still exactly who he's always been. A young man with Down syndrome who sees beauty in differences, who chooses kindness over cruelty, who believes that everyone has value and deserves to be celebrated for who they are. They laughed at my son because he has Down syndrome, but he didn't let their laughter define him. Instead, he chose to define himself, and in doing so, he helped all of us understand what it truly means to be human. Different is beautiful. Different is valuable. Different is necessary. And sometimes, just sometimes, different is exactly what the world needs to hear.